Hello and welcome to this very special FinTech Power 50 webinar all about Paytech. So Paytech is an everyday facet of people's lives. Whether you're a regular consumer, business or beyond, you're going to be making some payments. And the industry is constantly working to innovate and create new and better ways to pay. In this webinar, we're going to take a look at the disruption of the traditional payments ecosystem and the opportunities that fintechs have taken to revolutionize the way people pay. With the help of our panelists, we're going to be breaking down the factors shaping the payments industry and discover what's next for a sector that's already innovating to the max. So I'm thrilled to be here today with my fantastic panelists, and we're going to have a great discussion. So I'm so thrilled to welcome Paul Chandler, the Regional Sales Director Europe at Compass Plus, and Jack Luttrell, Head of Strategic Partners at Clear Junction. Thank you both so much for joining me today.
Thank you for
Thank you
having
for
us.
having me.
Amazing. Well, before we get started on what I'm sure is going to be a really great discussion, it would be fantastic if you guys could give us a bit of an introduction, both to yourselves and as well as your company and the kind of things that you do. So, Jack, I'll go to you first for that one.
Sure. And look, thank you once again for having me. So my name is Jack Luttrell. I'm Head of Strategic Partners here at Clear Junction, have an FX background, and have been working at Clear Junction now for a little over 2 years. As a business, what do Clear Junction do? Well, we provide financial inclusivity to financial institutions around the globe by providing them access to our financial payment infrastructure. My role within the business is working with key and strategic partners to bring them within our ecosystem to leverage our payment infrastructure for their end consumers.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jack, for joining us. And then, Paul, I'd love a little introduction from you, if possible, please.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Paul Chandler, the Sales Director for Europe at Compass Plus. I've been in the payments industry since 2007, just generic payments, domestic payments, international payments, etc. Compass Plus has been around for 30 years. We're a leading next-gen payments platform provider. We serve currently 400 financial institutions, and our premise is basically to help our customers make their payments happen.
Fantastic stuff. So obviously two fantastic panelists to talk all about Paytech. And so I'm really excited for hopefully what is going to be a fantastic discussion, which I'm sure it will be. So to kick us off, I thought we'd start with a really, I guess, high level question in terms of how has fintech revolutionized the way people pay? You know, it's been however many years it's been now with this constant innovation and constant things changing and moving. And I'd just love to know, kind of in your opinions, how has that revolution sort of played out? So, Paul, I'll go to you for that one first.
Thank you. Yeah, it's actually a really good question. Revolution is also, I think, the appropriate word here, because the fintech revolution continues to transform, the future of finance. It reshapes the way that we all bank and we invest, and the way we actually have access to financial services. You don't have to go back 10 years. You only have to go back pre-COVID era to reflect on the way we made and received payments. And then after or post-COVID, we found ourselves as consumers basically all having adopt the transformation into digital payments, touch and go, etc. So leaving behind the old card and PIN to accept contactless and more and more wallets. So that in itself is a revolution. And I think the beauty of the fintech revolution as we know it today is that it's actually won the consumer. The consumer is behind it, it's on board. And that in itself, for me, fintech is the champion of us as consumers.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really interesting. I completely agree with you on the consumer side of things. But Jack, I'd love to know your thoughts on this, where the revolution lies.
Yeah, look, fintech is a term that's been coined in the last decade or two, but it's a term that's been around since technically the 1800s. Financial technology through the first transatlantic cable to pass information and to trade electronically. So it's a buzzword that has most certainly become more apparent in the last 10, 15 years or so. Obviously starting majorly with cards and then moving to NFC technology through contactless payments. But also most certainly in the younger generations, we're starting to see massive adoption of mobile banking and digital wallets. I think it's most certainly going to become more of the future. If you look at Africa, it's most certainly an unbanked continent. And through the use of digital wallets, it allows individuals who have access to a smartphone, which is for the most part what the majority of people on earth own. They can use that to make payments. They can use that to collect payments, to collect salaries, perhaps from companies that aren't based in Africa. And yeah, it's something that I expect that will grow as time goes on. And secondly, probably the most important is the security aspect. Through digital banking, through mobile banking, being able to biometrically authenticate your account as you log in, or as and when you make a payment, adds that extra layer I think we needed. So yeah, just to summarize, I think as time goes on, there will be more fintech innovations. It's just about finding the right one that works for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really interesting that you bring up Africa, because I have had quite a lot of discussions with various people at the moment just about sort of the African market and how it's growing and how much Paytech is really making a difference. So that's fantastic. And I guess sort of leading on from that, what are the opportunities for fintech when it comes to payments? Because I feel like, even though we've already had so much of this revolution, there's still quite a lot to tap into, right? There's still quite a lot of potential. Jack, I'll go back to you for that one.
Sure. So I'm going to come back to my own personal beliefs on this one, and looking into the world of crypto. So it's a term that has been probably misrepresented over the last decade, and has become some sort of gambling house where you log in, you put down a little bit of money and try to 10x your money. But that's not real world utility. That's not real world use cases that we've started to see. With the recent approval of the Bitcoin ETF, we can now probably officially say that crypto is mainstream, with the likes of huge hedge funds around the world and huge investment companies around the world start to put their money where their mouth is. But when it comes to cross-border payments and remittance, the use of tokens, crypto tokens or stable coins, adds a seamless manner to the payment scheme that is not very apparent in traditional cross-border payment mechanisms, comparatively to perhaps Swift, and having to exchange currencies and then move those funds between different payment service providers. It can take a lot of time and it can be very unclear. So I think stable coins and the use of crypto is most certainly a huge opportunity for fintech. And perhaps one final point is going back to the old security. How can we leverage perhaps AI to manage fraud detection, fraud prevention, and essentially remove the human error out of this proposition? As a salesperson, Paul, I'm sure you can appreciate that we fight with compliance from time to time, and they can be very black and white in what I call a very colorful world. And being able to add perhaps AI decision making that takes in every piece of information and collates that in a fashion to present to someone within compliance, I think has some scope for huge opportunities within the fintech, but also perhaps regtech, compliance as a service space moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. Totally agree.
Well, I'd love to get your thoughts on that as well, Paul, if you had anything to expand on
Yep,
Jack's
yeah.
point, or your own answer entirely, of course, in terms of opportunity.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. Yeah. Well, I think you can look at a number of scenarios, but the opportunities in terms of, opportunities for fintech are frankly endless. And I think we're actually looking at the new norm when it comes to fintech technologies within the payment space. So using fintech to underpin financial inclusion, as Jack alluded to earlier, for example, access to money and making payments available to everyone, in particular over the mobile phone, which is increasingly a major adoption by everybody. So it's become ubiquitous, hasn't it, really? So payments becoming totally frictionless and seamless, through the use of biometrics, etc. And greater trust, I think, also for both businesses and consumers, and ultimately the minimization of fraud is also important. And as consumers, we're engaging less and less in person or making payments over a counter. Fintechs have led the way with technology to trust customers are who they actually say they are. And that's in itself is a revolution, isn't it? But presents new opportunities for third-party connectivity, for interoperability. Open banking is addressing some of that, obviously embedded payments on the increase, etc. So, third-party collaboration is certainly a great opportunity for embellished and facilitated through fintech.
And so what are the main challenges then associated with the payments on the flip side of that? And Paul, I'd love to ask you that one first.
Yeah, thank you. The key challenges off the top of my head include obviously risk, fraud, and cybercrime. And some of the legacy players, as we know today in the industry, are actually systemic in many ways. And unless they invest in typically, the next gen platforms that embrace and facilitate fintech technologies to perform on behalf of consumers ultimately, then and we see some more transformation from legacy to next gen. I think these things underpin some of the challenges and help some of the major financial institutions overcome the challenges associated with payments today. But the regulatory scrutiny, data security, interoperability, these are all buzzwords which have been around for some time, but they still underpin some of the major challenges. Certainly for the bigger players, some of the legacy guys, the neobanks, the new challengers don't necessarily have this problem. They don't have that legacy, and they're actually riding the wave of fintech to their advantage and bringing consumers with them. And again, as consumers, I can just within nanoseconds change banks. In the old days, you didn't used to do that, or you wouldn't have done it. And I think the UK has the world record for people having one bank account all their life, and that's changing rapidly as we see, with the Z-Gen population, etc. So, yeah, those are some of the challenges as I see them.
It's interesting you mentioned about the bank account thing, because I was literally just having a conversation about that with my
Yeah.
colleagues last week after some new research came out. So I completely agree. It's quite a lot going on there. But Jack, what do you think about the challenges? Where is it that we're seeing some sticking points in trying to access this potential?
Sure. Look, I can only really echo what Paul mentioned. The ever-changing, complex regulatory environment. It's always changing, whether that's based off consumer processes that are changing and regulation is trying to keep up with it, or perhaps there's new technologies. You could look at open banking and the way that that's grown over the last 5 years. That was due to a major regulation change. Also for crypto, the most recent regulatory information regarding stablecoins and stablecoin payments. This paves the way for businesses in the UK that are regulated in the right manner to provide such services. So you need to be nimble, and as a large company, being nimble is very difficult and comes at a cost. And keeping up with that is probably one of the largest challenges, in my opinion. And finally, money talks. At the end of the day, we are in a service business, and as sad as it is to say, it is a race to the bottom. This is just the game that we play, and it's regarding, or what's important is to create relationships and to create stickiness outside of the payment solutions that you're actually providing, whether that's some sort of internal ecosystem, or working on key and strategic partnerships to either embed different verticals into your services. So yeah, there's many challenges, and there will always be challenges in this industry. Keeping on top of them is paramount to flourish as a licensed entity in the space.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love what you said about having to sort of expand in your offering, because I think that's something we're seeing time and time again now, that just having one solid service or one solid product just isn't enough anymore, which, like you say, is such a shame, but it's kind of what you've got to do to adapt to survive, right? So that's really interesting. And I guess I'd love to touch on very quickly something that you mentioned earlier, in terms of how the payments industry is influenced by its consumers. So how much of a say do the consumers have when it comes to what the payments industry is doing, what services are being offered, what products are being offered. And I guess in terms of like a part of that, both consumers in the traditional consumer sense, but also I guess businesses as well. Like how much say do business demands have into sort of B2B offerings? I mean, Jack, I'll throw that one to you first.
Sure. Look, of course, the majority of industries out there are influenced by its consumers, and the payment industry is most certainly sat within that bucket. What do consumers want? They want convenience, they want security, and they want cheap or free access. So it's up to companies like Clear Junction and like Compass to build innovative solutions around just that. I know we've already touched upon it very briefly, but look at the unbanked population in Africa. A combination of certain companies in Africa built out the mobile wallets and digital wallets to essentially bank those unbanked individuals. The majority of people have access to a mobile phone or smartphone in Africa, but they do not have access to a bank account. And that's to make payments, hold payments, receive payments for whatever reason. Also outside of that, these African economies, if you look at most recently, the Nigerian naira spun 15 to 20% within a few days. So obviously they don't want to hold local currency. So this provides individuals a way to bank and a way to receive payments in a way that just wasn't possible before. And with 45% of worldwide wallets being domiciled in Africa, I expect that will only grow with time within the region, and just proves that's what the consumer needed. Perhaps they didn't know they wanted it yet, and there was businesses that innovated to that effect. And one final point is the cross-border transactions. Obviously, we've got the direction of crypto coming into play, but let's not forget about Wise or TransferWise. I remember when I first started going to university and my dad had to make payments across the pond. It took 3 to 4 days, sometimes as long as a week, and this was only back in 2012. It cost relatively quite a lot, and there was no real user access. You might have to go into your bank, you might have to call them. And Wise noticed or took notice of that and built a very comfortable customer-facing portal that allows individuals to understand the full cost, the full timeline, and be comfortable in making regular payments abroad. So I think those are just two examples of what the consumer perhaps needed and individuals and businesses built around that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I really like all the points you've just made there, Jack. But Paul, from your perspective, what do you think on this one as well in terms of the consumer demand?
Yeah, well, I think, thankfully, as consumers, we are in control, basically, since it's more like the dog wagging the tail now, or the tail wagging the dog, rather. So consumers, we demanding more seamless and tech-savvy financial services today, putting banks and payment systems under increasing pressure to deliver the appropriate services, and we're seeing that more and more clearly, again, from the bigger boys, I'd like to say. So to stay competitive, banks are increasingly collaborating more and more. That's a good thing as well, very positive. So the consumers, have influenced that. So banks are having to collaborate with third parties, and moreover, actually with fintech players to innovate and stay strategic. So I think the consumer is very much in control and driving this space, to its advantage.
Which I guess is what you want in the end of the day, isn't it? There's no point creating solutions and products that no one wants to use, I guess, and if you're thinking at a very sort of really high level
Yeah.
aspect of it, at the end of the day. I guess we've been talking a lot, obviously, about sort of all this innovation and all this new product coming in, but I'd love to know, I guess, the question that feels a bit buzzwordy at this stage, but do we think that cash is ever going to disappear as a payment method? Are we ever going to say goodbye to cash on the whole, or is it gonna cling on in certain ways? Paul, I'll ask you that first.
Yeah, I mean, this question. Who knows? But I think it's impossible to say yes or no. But ultimately, listen, smaller coins have really no value today. Since the halfpenny, the halfpenny was taken out of action in the 1980s. But people do like the anonymity associated with cash. There's no way to trace it. You can't trace it back to who actually spent it. It can be gifted far easily than a digital payment can be. Or you throw some loose change into a bucket for charity collections and so forth and so on. So I think there's life in the old dog yet, without any doubt. I don't see the end of cash.
That's so interesting what you say about gifting, because I do think my grandparents would struggle with birthdays and Christmases if they couldn't put cash in a card anymore. So I definitely agree with you on that one. But Jack, what do you think about this? Do we think cash is going anywhere from your perspective?
Yeah, look, I think the eventual farewell to cash is most certainly uncertain. If you look at the stats, we're heading there. Debit transactions are up month on month. For the most part, cash has been down over the last decade. It was around 61% of all transactions in the UK back in 2012, and now it's around 14%. I think it depends on the demographic. I think it depends on the jurisdiction. As you've touched upon, older generations, they require to use cash. They need to use cash. I think the percentages of them using digital wallets are as low, perhaps, as cash transactions currently in the UK. So there's some catching up to do on both sides if cash were to be said goodbye, essentially. But yeah, it will depend on the jurisdiction. I think it will depend on the demographic. There's been a trio of tech advancements, changing consumer preferences and government initiatives that have gradually shifted to the world of digital payments. But the persistence, as I've said, of cash and the need for financial inclusion in certain regions and demographics is undeniable. And I expect that in some jurisdictions, it will grow massively, and in some jurisdictions, maybe not so much. Obviously, with the potential introduction of CBDCs and programmable money, there seems to be a lot of rumors about how this might affect the average user and how they might or might not be able to spend their money. I think this is all hearsay. We don't really have a clue about what the future holds for that sort of programmable funds. But I think for cash, it's here and will be here for the foreseeable future. I just think in the Western world, it will be seen less and less as time goes on.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you. Well, thank you both again for this discussion. I do have one more question for you before we go, and that is just very quickly. I'd love for you to put your, I guess, your future eyes on and looked ahead towards the rest of this year. We're 1 month in of 2024. It's already been quite a big year for a lot of reasons, but I'd love for you to give sort of your thoughts very quickly on what you think sort of the big trends are going to be within payments this year. Is there going to be one thing that rises up above the others, or I guess how do you think 2024 is going to go? Jack, I'll come to you first quickly for that one.
Well, I have three, but I don't want to use all of them in case one of them is Paul's. So I'm just gonna choose the one that's close to my heart is crypto, and the use of real world utility projects to solve real world problems. Cross-border payments, remittance into LATAM, into Asia, into Africa, can be made in a more seamless manner via stable coins. So I think it's imperative that financial institutions plan for that eventuality within their own services.
Amazing, thank you. And Paul, what do you think? What are the big trends going to be?
Yeah, I think there are two major things. One we've already had a taste of, and that's the buy now, pay later, which has completely revolutionized the consumer lending borrowing sector as we know it today. And albeit it's been scrutinized by regulators in just about every country all over the world, it's here to stay, and it's changed consumers' buying habits for everyone, I think. I mean, I'm certainly touched by it. As a family, we're touched by it, and so I see that as an increasing trend, despite the regulatory scrutiny. And the other point is actually tokenization, and this is tokenization, I think, will become ubiquitous in payments, without any doubt. And this is where your card number isn't just swapped, for so where your data isn't just taken and hidden and swapped. I'm talking about actually where it's swapped for a unique token. And so it's between you and the merchant. So that means if the merchant actually gets hacked, the token's useless to the to the hacker. And I think we'll be seeing more and more of that as we move forward. So it's tokenization and buy now, pay later for sure.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much again, both for joining us. It's been fantastic to speak with you. I'm sure we could carry on talking for an age about this because it's always really interesting to get into things. But thank you so much again for joining me. Just a quick note to our online audience. If you like what you've heard today, make sure you head over to the Fintech Power 50 website, thepower50.com, to learn more. And you can also follow along the conversation from this webinar over on X or Twitter, whatever you call it, with the hashtag FP50 Paytech 2024. But once again, Jack, Paul, thank you so much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Speak to you soon. Cheers.